What's your creepiest real life story? My grandfather owns several forests around the village he lives in, and he drives through them every week to check how the trees are doing and whether something needs to be fixed. He really loves his trees and has a sharp eye for any potential sickness or insect that could pose a threat. A decade or two ago, hitchhikers were very common. Even in the thinly populated areas of Bavaria, he encountered them regularly and was always happy to help. He literally picked up every single hitchhiker he found. One day, however, he had a bad feeling about one. Without any reason, he dismissed this one hitchhiker standing on the side of the path. Later that day, there was a radio broadcast about a previously convicted murderer who killed someone in the woods and got caught trying to flee by hopping onto someone's car. Just writing this down makes me shudder again. I think your grandfather is Peter Parker, because that is top-notch Spidey sense right there. When I was 12 or 13, we went to a McDonald's on the way to the beach. I went to pee before I ate and to wash my hands. Just as I started peeing, this guy comes in, walks to the urinal next to me and just watches. Doesn't pee, just watches. I can see him out of the corner of my eye. His eyes locked onto my junk. What there was of it. I had a bathing suit on, so I'm doing the whole junk flop over thing. Guys know what that means, so I can't hide it. I can't stop it. I can now though. Not sure why when you're a kid you can't stop your pee. He just smiled creepily as I finished, put things away and washed my hands. He just stood there smiling. I gave him one more look as I left the bathroom and never saw him again. I was with my friend's mom and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to get in trouble and really wanted to go to the beach. That logic makes no sense. I realize that now. But I ate my filet-o-fish with a WTF look on my face and had an awesome day at the beach. I'm more creeped out that you ate a filet-o-fish. This happened to a friend of mine's housemate during their time at university. It was at the house she lived in before moving in with my friend after this event occurred. During her second year at university, she lived in a house with 3 other people. At Easter, everyone went back home to their parents for the Easter holidays. Her first night back after returning from the Easter break, she woke up in the morning to find some things moved about in her bedroom. She thought nothing of it and put it down to moving it herself the night before and not remembering. She woke up the next morning to more stuff moved around, like her TV and chair, etc. She started to get a bit scared and told her housemates to quit moving her stuff about as it wasn't funny and very creepy. They all said they didn't touch anything. The next morning even more stuff had been moved and she started to get very worried. Again, she told her housemates to stop, but they swore they haven't touched anything and were getting very concerned themselves. The 4th night she woke up during the middle of the night. She looked over and in the darkness she could see a figure sitting at her desk. She freaked the frick out, ran out of the room, locked the door and called the police. The police turn up and they unlock the door. Sure enough, there is a guy there, probably early 20s, sitting at her desk, calm as anything. The police arrest him and take him away. A couple of days later they find out that the guy was actually a mentally handicapped person who lived at a care home not far down the road. His mother, who was his full-time carer, had looked after him until her death a year or so earlier, when he was then moved into the home. He's been a missing person for a few weeks now, and it turned out that the house this girl and her friends lived in used to be him and his mother's house. In particular, her bedroom used to be his. He eventually told the police that when he ran away from the home, his old house was where he went to. He managed to get in somehow and spent the whole time there, 2.5 weeks, sleeping under the girl's bed, coming out at night while she slept to move her stuff, so it was like how he had it when it was his bedroom. Safe to say, she moved straight out of there, and that's when she moved in with my friend. I was driving on some country roads at 1 AM with my buddy one night in the summer. Come up to a 1-lane, old, rickety bridge at the bottom of a valley. The bridge is also next to an old bar that now sits abandoned and is frequently vandalized, so it's already sketchy. Pull onto the bridge and there is a car waiting on the other side. At first we thought nothing of it. If a car is on the bridge you have to sit there and wait your turn to cross. But here's where it gets spooky. My friend and I get closer and closer to the car, but something is wrong. We see a white glove waving at us at about halfway to the other side. As we are almost across the bridge, we see that the person waving his white glove has an expressionless mask on. Needless to say, we freak the fuck out as we have to slowly weave around the car and stare face to face with the person still waving. Drive off, scared shitless, but have to take the same road back. We get to the bottom of the hill, car is still there, but there is no one inside. We kinda look around for a second before we get over there and we haven't been back since. Frick expressionless masks, man. TLDR. Accidentally drove to a beating spot for an illicit deal. About 6 years ago, I was in my final year of high school and due to the weird timetable that 12th grade had at my school, we regularly had 2+ hour breaks between classes, early finishes, and longer lunch breaks. My house was about a 20-minute walk away from school, and I would usually just walk home either by myself or with a friend and chill until we had to head back. My school was located on the outskirts of the city, and my house a little bit further out. I lived on about 40 acres on a dirt road. Along the dirt road, I had been passing a really foul smell about 5 minutes away from my house. I couldn't tell where the smell was coming from, but it was definitely close to the road. I had passed this smell about 4 times over roughly a week of school but figured it was a dead animal due to the area. After an exam, I was walking home with a friend and the smell was worse than ever, so as you do, we decided to walk into the grass to search for whatever the smell was. We ended up finding a black garbage bag that was completely blown up like a balloon about 5 meters from the road. As a joke, I threw a rock at it and it popped and shot out this foul white goo and immediately, my friend and I started dry reaching. We ran away as fast as we could, laughing and vomiting, back home to my place. I didn't think anything of it as I figured it was a cat or something that someone had dumped. I remember walking back from school the next week, by myself, and there were mounted police on their horses walking down the road slowly, and near one of the entrances to my property, there was a dog squad with sniffer dogs walking around. I didn't take much notice of all the police and what they were doing, but literally as soon as I got closer to the area that we had found the bag, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach and I thought, oh crap. The bag ended up being the body of a girl who had been murdered and was dumped along the fence line of my property. I still feel sick when I think about it. TLDR. Threw a rock at a garbage bag which happened to have a rotting corpse in it. This isn't exactly creepy, but it's one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. I was driving down the motorway with my boyfriend in the passenger seat, and my dad in the seat behind my own. My dad is an epileptic and his fits are extremely sporadic. Sometimes he goes extremely stiff and other times he will try to get out of places or grab and punch people. Mid-conversation I felt his hands wrap around my throat as I was driving, pulling my head back and making it increasingly difficult to drive. My boyfriend managed to help steer the car into the hard shoulder, but it was one of the scariest experiences in my life. Man, I wouldn't know what to do. I am not epileptic, but something similar happened to me. I lost control, blacked out and turned pretty violent to the people around me. Epilepsy sucks though, man. I hope you, your dad and your boyfriend are doing well. When I was about 10, my family of 6 lived in an extremely small apartment, 2 bedrooms upstairs and then the living room. When I was tired of my siblings, I would sleep downstairs. One night I am lying on the couch facing the front door and watching the sky through the window by the door when a face shows up in the window illuminated by a lighter. I freeze, and the face goes away. I'm pretty relieved, thinking it was maybe our druggy neighbors seeing if my parents were still awake when it shows up again. I try to scream, but when I opened my mouth nothing came out, not a sound. The person then kicks in the door and walks in the room. He sees me, smiles and goes towards the kitchen. As he comes out of the kitchen with a knife, my dad makes it down the stairs and the guy books it out of there. I still can't sleep easily on couches to this day. TLDR. Pretty sure I was almost murdered by random dude. I don't know how so many people can sleep near windows without blinds or curtains. It's one of my biggest fears unless I'm not on a ground level room. Not sure if this counts as creepy or not, but I was walking through a ravine with my best friend when we were kids. We spent the summers up near Sagatuck, Michigan and would go out on our own all the time to hike through the rivers and ravines that were around that area. We had hiked for about an hour through the shallow water and were looking for cool rocks and other things in the river. We came across a large black cord looking thing and my friend picked it up. He immediately became frozen and had a very scary look in his face. I had no idea what was going on. and was only in 5th grade, so didn't know that he had picked up a high voltage wire and his body was locked in place. He couldn't move and couldn't do anything but just stand there with all this electricity flowing through his body. I almost grabbed the big wire to take it out of his hand, but something made me not do that. I picked up a big rock and threw it down on his hands to knock the huge wire onto the ground. This worked. He immediately came back to reality, but was obviously out of it. He sat down for a while and finally we decided to walk back to our summer house. We never told anyone, but I realized that if I had gone to pick up that wire we both would have been locked in place in that ravine and I have no idea what would have happened. I have no idea why I stopped from grabbing the wire from him, but I am glad I somehow was smart enough to think about it before I did anything. Has his powers come in yet? When I was about 6, a car drove by my house while I was outside on a slip and slide with my next door neighbor. The car slowed down when he got close to me, rolled down his window and started talking to me, but he was talking kind of quiet to where I couldn't make out what he was saying. So I walked closer and he asks, "Don't you go to the school down the street?" I said, "Oh yeah." "Why?" "Because my son said he recognized you." I heard the car door unlock and there was a man in his mid-30s sitting in the back seat. Right as the door started to open I feel someone grab me by the collar of shirt and yank me into their arms. It was my neighbor's mom. She dragged me all the way back to her house and as soon as the driver saw her, he peeled off. When we got back to the house she called the cops immediately. I didn't even realize how close I was to getting kidnapped until I saw my mom crying when she heard about what happened. Frick, that noise. There are a lot of close calls on this thread, but dang. A+ neighbor's mom. Glad she was there. Not very many creepy things happen to me, so sorry if this story is a bit dull, but it did freak me out a little at the time. A few years ago, when I was 14 or so, I was out walking my dog, a Hyper Chesapeake Retriever mix, in a rural suburban area. It was a fairly quiet road. A car would breeze by once every 5 minutes or so. An old grey Toyota Corolla or some car like that passed by. Nothing unusual. But a minute later, this car passes again, and the car slows down a ton when it's coming toward me, giving me the impression this guy was checking me out. This guy ends up passing up and down the road stalking me. I end up faking having a cell phone and talking to someone on the other end, in case he got any ideas. The dog gave me a sense of security too. After maybe the 6th or 7th time this guy does this, I duck into the woods to hide. He swings by twice more, and I wait 10 minutes to see if he comes back. He doesn't. I end up running back home, with a very confused and disappointed dog. I think later on there was a news story that matched my stalker's description and was charged with attempted debauchery. Could be wrong though. Still, creepy. I didn't go for a walk for about a week after that. LOL, I'm a guy and even I do that thing where you pretend to be calling someone, but man, I'm glad you got out of that one safely XD. When I was in middle school my friends and I were hanging out on a trampoline in the backyard late at night, maybe like 11 PM or so. The backyards are all connecting, meaning there is trees and small fences separating them but you can walk through them. Some guy comes through and asks if we have seen a little orange tabby cat and we told him no. He said he lives around the corner, if we see it he will give us a reward. Okay, cool. We think nothing of it and go back to talking about Pokemon cards and why Charizard is a god on paper. No joke. 2 minutes after this guy leaves, this little car wanders through and we think, is that the cat he was talking about? My friend grabs it and we all proudly march to the guy's house to collect our reward. The guy is sitting on his front porch and we bring the cat to him. He's so excited and says, "Oh, I have the reward inside, just come in and I'll give it to you." We were kinda sketched out but we decided to go in and to stay. He says, "Oh, if you don't come in I can only give the reward to the ones that come in." He was gonna give $100 a person to go in. Still, we had 2 guys go in and take what felt like forever, but they came out and had $200 with them. They said there was plastic on everything in there and something felt wrong. I feel as though if we all went we would have been killed, but keeping 2 outside that knew where their friends were I guess was enough to deter him. Still was a weird occurrence. Interesting. I wonder if he put the cat there to walk through after he asked you guys. 2 inside and 2 outside was smart though. Guy was probably bummed he had to pay $200 for not thinking his abduction plan through very well. I was walking home from the bar and I stopped at what I thought was a safe spot to squat down and do a pee in the bushes. Obviously I had scoped out the spot poorly because not halfway through my pee I looked up to my left and about 10 feet away was a homeless man. We locked eyes while I was peeing. He told me that we were lovers. I said K. He then told me he had been following me for the last 6 blocks, at which point I cut the stream and pulled my pants up and started to walk swiftly to my house, and then he said something referencing his genitals and I started to run. TLDR. Had uncomfortable conversation with homeless man while peeing in the bushes. I've come to give you my seed. K. Coming home late from a friend's house in a real bad area of Los Angeles. I mean, these streets were gang infested, so I used to walk around with a hammer in my waist because I couldn't get a gun. An old station wagon with all the windows blocked out by aluminum foil pulls up and old man looks at me and uses his hand to beckon me to come in. I showed him the hammer, he just keeps beckoning. I got the creeps and starting running and cut through a park and he was already waiting for me. I had to jump a couple of fences to lose him. He looked like freaking weirdo. Scariest crap ever. Windows blocked out by aluminum foil. He was clearly just trying to save you from the government mind control. This happened to my wife during college. She lived on campus, in a more remote mountainous area. One night, maybe 8 or 9, her and a few classmates decide to take a nice peaceful walk up the mountain road past the college. They had been walking for 10 minutes, when suddenly car lights flick on in the darkness at the side of the road and a vehicle comes screeching past them. 2 seconds pass and a half-naked girl comes running out of the darkness shrieking. My wife, terrified, runs the other way back to the college. Luckily the others stayed with the girl and helped her. Seems she had just been abducted and violated, and then dropped off in a remote area in the night. When I was 8, I had a friend spending the night one night. It was super late and we were playing Barbies in the living room. I then suddenly got the feeling like we were being watched. I looked to my right and there in the window stood a man. I remember everything about him to this day. This was a little over 20 years ago. He was a white man. I could tell because he was wearing a short-sleeved, dark blue t-shirt that had a little pocket on the chest. His arms were very hairy. He also wears black gloves and a black ski mask. He had his hands cupped on either side of his face, so as to block any glare from the street lights to get a better view of us. I yelped and curled into a ball. My friend saw him and did the same thing. She asked me what were we gonna do. I said, at the count of 3, we're gonna run upstairs and get my dad. I got to 2 and took off. My friend was right behind me. We barged into my dad's room and tell him what we saw. He leapt out of bed and ran outside, but the guy was gone. Found out years later that there was a rapist on the loose in that area at that time. Was he the rapist? I don't know, but I don't like me curtains open at night anymore. When I was in like 4th or 5th grade, I lived with my mom and her GF in a 2-bedroom apt. Well, we had strange things sort of happen around the house, but I was young, imaginative. Well, one day we woke up, well rather my mom's GF woke up and soon I was being shaken awake. What the frick did you do to the kitchen? I was like, I stay in my room pretty much all the time. She yanks me out of bed and drags me by my arm to the kitchen. My mom is standing in the doorway of their bedroom right next to mine. I look and see cocoa powder all over the counter, like Nesquik crap. Now, we were pretty freaking poor back then, like, my meal at school was 75% of what I got to eat in a day. I swore up and down I didn't do it, but as I got closer there were little handprints all in the cocoa, smearing and smacking it everywhere, on the cupboards, the fridge. It was on the floor even, with little footprints. My hands were clean, my feet were clean, but I was the only child in the house, and they sure as heck didn't think someone broke in, or heck not even a ghost. I got a pretty good spanking for that. Frick you ghost. My meal at school was 75% of what I got to eat in a day. Broke my heart right there. I had just moved to a new city and was living on my own for the first time. I worked late night shifts at my job, and rode a bike home a fair distance. It was about 1 AM and I was riding my bike home when I began to approach the local elementary school. The school was on the opposite side of the street, lit up from the inside with those orange lights they turn on at night. As I began to approach the school I noticed something strange. I couldn't really make it out but something seemed off. I stared hard, squinting to see it better as I got closer and closer. Then, as the school was directly across from me, I saw a little girl standing inside the school, staring out the door at me. I flipped my crap and pedaled my butt off. After a few moments I kinda got a grip and looked back over my shoulder, and there she was, standing on the sidewalk staring at me. I rode home like a bat out of heck and avoided that street like the plague for weeks. Then, one day I worked a day shift and figured, hey, it can't hurt to bike down that street during the day. So yeah, turns out during the day they have these 2 wooden cutouts of kids they put up to mark the crosswalk. At night they store them just inside the door. I had seen the one inside the school and not noticed the one that apparently was forgotten and left outside until later, making it appear as though the same child had been in both spots. Somewhere a janitor was laughing his butt off. I'm a large man with a shaved head and a pretty long goatee. I look a little like Bam Bam Bigelow without the tattoos or the spandex. For a long time I lived on my own in an apartment. One day a small Asian girl moved in upstairs. One night after working a late shift I came home and it was raining pretty heavily. When I pulled into my parking space I noticed the lady left her window down on her car. So even though I was pretty tired and soaked to the bone I went upstairs and knocked on her door. The blinds in the window next to the door parted and I saw a little pair of eyes look at me then go wide as saucers. Next thing I know I hear the chain go on the door and the lights go out. Then it struck me. Late at night in the rain a large man she doesn't know knocks on her door. I left a note on her door that said, "Your car window is down." I figure she probably spent all night hiding in a corner. At about 2 AM our neighbor rang our doorbell and was banging on the door. My dad opened the door and she said something about her brother, who was mentally handicapped, murdering her parents and locking her in the closet. He thought she was just having a nightmare, but it turns out she was telling the truth. Cops were called. The guy is in the insane asylum now. Neighbor still lives in that house. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.